Galatians 2:16. See, they get this twisted around today, and they think that's what we're talking about when we talk about keeping the laws of God. They think we're talking about you got to be circumcised. They say, are y'all trying to be on the law? Even that group over here, the UPC and that other church. They think that's what we're saying. They don't separate this stuff. They don't understand this stuff. And Peter said, Paul's writings are hard to be understood. Here, catch on to this. Galatians 2:16, Paul said, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. Now, look how many times he mentions works of the law just in this one verse. No man is justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ. Even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. And Paul said, for by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. The old covenant could not make anybody perfect. Doing the whole thing will not make you perfect. So let's catch on what he's talking about. What are those works of the law? Now I'm going to read you one example. And I hope you catch on what he's talking about, works of the law. Figure yourself how you would like to do this every time you committed a sin. That's what they were teaching. Leviticus 4:2-12. God spoke to Moses, speaking to the children of Israel, saying, if a soul, one man, shall sin through ignorance, he don't even have to be willfully doing it. Just be forgetful. Boy, we all be in trouble when we've had to have a good thinker. Forgetting stuff. If a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord, concerning things which ought not to be done. If you do it through ignorance, and shall do against any of them, or if a priest that is anointed do sin, he'd have to do the same thing before he can do the job to help you out. Remember what it said, Paul wrote down about priests on earth have to offer sacrifices for his own sins and then the people's. He got to get himself right through the sacrifice offering before he go do somebody else's. Jesus don't have to do that. He's in heaven. If any man sin, we go to him. He takes care of it. If the priest that is anointed do sin, according to the sin of the people, like this guy up here, then let him bring for his sin, which he has sinned, a young bullock without blemish unto the Lord for a sin offering. Now we're going to go through step by step what you got to do if you had to do it. You say you a soul sin through ignorance against any commandment. You had to bring a young bullock without blemish, which means you've got a pen around your house somewhere that's got bullocks in it, different animals. You got to feed them. You got to raise them. You got to make sure they birth right. You got to make sure they're fed right. You got to make sure the bad dogs, wolves, whatever else don't come in there and steal them and kill them and all this kind of stuff. You got to do that. Does that work? That's just a start. All of a sudden you realize you committed a sin against God's commandments, even through ignorance. Oh, I forgot about it, didn't know it. Well, no mercy and grace in those days. Remember that. You had to go out there and look through the pasture. There's one, he's limping. Can't get him. Can't get that one. I eat him later. You go through and another one got something. Can't get that one. You got to find one without a blemish. Then you got to catch it. I don't know how big a bullock is. I don't even know what it's in reference to. I've never seen one. I don't know if it's talking about a bigger cow or something in the middle. Sometimes we need to look that up and get what they are. But whatever it was, even if it was a sheep, whatever kind of animal that was, they had to round him up. Whether it be you could do it by yourself or get a friend or one of your kids. You had to round. This is just for you. It ain't for your wife. It's not for your son. It's not for your daughter. You done this. You got to round that little creature up, tie him up, put a leash on him, however you want to do it. You got to put him in a wagon and walk him all the way to Jerusalem. That's the only place God accepted sacrifices. So that's work. That's the start. That's work. But you're not done. You just started. That's called the one sin. He shall bring the bullock unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord, shall lay his hand upon the bullock's head, and kill the bullock before the Lord. So you bring him up there. If I'm understanding correctly, I don't think the priest does this part. You bring him up there and you lay your hand on its head. And you take a knife and you slit its throat. Because he had a sin. It's going to die or whatever it does. A bellow or something. And you got a pan down there. Catches its blood. And it takes a while for it to drain out. And until it dies. That's work. That's something you got to do. Get your sin. Now, I ain't talking about keeping the whole law, telling the Gentiles in Antioch, telling the Gentiles in Macedonia, y'all got to bring them all the way across the Aegean Sea and go over here and sacrifice. Now that you're in. And the priest that is anointed, he just got himself cleared, he got his robe on, he done been sanctified, he went through the process. Now he's got a job to do, now that's work on him. He shall take of the bullock's blood and bring it to the tabernacle. So he picks it up out of that tray. He carries it over there to the tabernacle. Probably get a little heavy. I don't know how much blood it was. To the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle the blood 7 times before the Lord, before the veil of the sanctuary. He's right there, and there's the veil. He sprinkles that blood. I mean, there's blood all over the place where they're sprinkling blood. Now, just think of this for this priest. While he takes care of this one guy, here come 5 people in there that done had a sin in their life. And they got to get rid of that sin. They're lining up. They're getting ready to do the same process. Kill another animal, kill another animal. Maybe there's more priests in there. Take care of that job. He's doing his job. Till he gets that done, he got to go get another one. That's works. Something the Oneness and Trinity don't ever look at here when you read what Paul's talking about. That's the works of the law, and that's what Paul said we don't do. And when you get this done, you're not done. You're not done now. And the priest shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the altar of sweet incense. Now, I don't know where that would be in the tabernacle, but he'd have to walk over here to the horns of where the sweet incense is and take of that blood and put it on the horn of the altar. He had to do that. Which is in the tabernacle of the congregation. He shall pour all the blood of the bullock at the bottom of the altar of the burnt offering. He'll take that blood and pour it out right there. And that ain't just one, they'll bring another later on. Which is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So he had to walk all the way around and go back to the door. He shall take off from it all the fat of the bullock. How you going to get all that fat off? What do you think? You got to get you a good knife, fillet knife. And they probably didn't have good fillet knives back then like we got now. For the sin offering. The fat that covers the inwards all the fat that is upon the inwards. How you going to get to the inwards? That's just about one sin. You got to take that animal somewhere and slice him open. You got to find the fat inside that animal. The two kidneys, the fat that's upon them, you find where his kidneys are. You slice the fat off of it, which is by the flanks. The caul above the liver with the kidneys, it shall he take away. So he takes that part out. And it was taken off from the bullock of the sacrifice of peace offerings, and the priest shall burn them upon the altar of the burnt offering. So where he poured out that blood of the burnt offering, now he got to take that part, put it over where the burnt offering goes. Now besides that, let's stop there a minute. How are we going to burn that on the burnt offering? You got to have a fire, but you got to have something. They didn't have, like we got nowadays, punch a button, fire come on, did it? What does that mean? Somebody had to go out there and get some wood. Somebody had to go out there and cut trees down. Somebody had to haul that wood into the area there, unload it where they could keep that fire going. Works of the law. And all this right here is not going to take sin out of that guy's heart. So the priest shall burn them upon the altar of the burnt offering. Now he still ain't done. He still got that animal sliced up. He just took the fat and other stuff over. The skin of the bullock, all his flesh, his head, his legs, his inwards, and his dung. Don't you know that stunk? Even the whole bullock shall he carry forth without the count. Now look back. Can't look back, yeah. He took the fat, he put it upon the altar of the burnt offering. That's one place it's burnt. That's inside this thing. Okay? He ain't done. He takes the skin of the bullock. He takes the flesh of it, his head, his legs, his inwards, his dung. The whole bullock shall he carry forth without the count. Now he's got to pick that thing up. I don't know if he had it in parts or what. And carry it outside, go to a place, a clean place where the ashes are poured out. Besides that, now think again. While they're burning that stuff, there's ashes collecting there. At one after the other, one after the other. Somebody's got a job of work to go in and pull that pan out that's got them ashes and carry it out there and pour the ashes out, bring it back in, put it back in the thing for more sacrifices, more sacrifices. Works of the law. That's what Paul's talking about. They've got to constantly do this stuff. And then when they carry this bullock with all that other stuff, the legs, the head, the inwards, the dung, and all that, to the clean place where ashes are poured out, and burn him on the wood with fire. Somebody's got to get cut wood and carry it out there at that place where the fire is going. Another fire is going. This other was offered up to God, but that part just been burned up. It says, well, the ashes are poured out, shall he be burnt. That was over, if any man sin, S-I-N, one sin. Transgressed the laws of God, broke a commandment of God. Now that's what the circumcision party is advocating. That's what, when it says you got to be circumcised, you can't be saved. And you got to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses. In reference to what we just read. If that would have been so, if that would have been carried on, we would have to be doing this here. They'd have to do it in Hickman. They have to do it in the city. And they have to do it in Fulton. They have to do it in Dyersburg. Everybody where there's a Church of Jesus Christ and getting the Holy Ghost, we still have to have animals. We still have to offer sacrifices. Paul said no. But that's what it's talking about, keeping the whole law. Leviticus 37. This is the law. That's just one sacrifice. Look at all the different ones got listed. The law of the burnt offering, the law of the meat offering, the law of the sin offering, the law of the trespass offering, the law of the consecrations, and the law of the sacrifice of peace offerings. All kind of different sacrifices for different things. They all had to be done, just what we read. Chopped up, cut up, burnt, fire, built, this, that, and other, constantly. That's just for one man. And the priesthood, they were lining people lining up. They would have been overworked if the Gentiles had started coming in there, and they didn't want Gentiles in there now. I'm thinking what they're saying, when the Gentiles come in and join the synagogues, if they would be circumcised, they could go into the temple. They accused Paul of bringing Timothy into the temple, and he was uncircumcised. Now, Paul didn't do it, but they accused him of that. But this is the law of the burnt offerings and all these sacrifices. Back to Galatians 2:21, and here Paul goes on, I do not frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain. Nothing they done through those sacrifices made that man that committed that sin any better. You know why he had to offer the sacrifice? Because he transgressed the law of God. People are not understanding and comprehending the distinctive difference about the what's called the Mosaic law of the sacrifices, because if everybody walked perfect, they wouldn't need that sacrifice anyway. If everybody walked holy, they would not need any penalties. Like somebody being stoned, somebody get 39 stripes on their back, or whatever penalties involved for breaking God's laws. There's differences in this. And Paul said, if righteousness come by the law, because they're preaching to keep the whole law, get circumcised, even after you get the Holy Ghost. Paul said, if righteousness come by the law, then Jesus died in vain. Nobody doing those things were perfected. Paul wrote in Hebrews 7:19. But now they're saying, well, once you get the Holy Ghost, now you can break God's laws. You see how they got this twisted? Satan is cunning. He's got a lot of folks believing they don't have to worry about God's Sabbath commandment. He's got them believing they don't have to worry about whether they eat swine or not. That's why they had to do the sacrificial laws, because they were sinning. If they committed a sin, they were transgressing God's law. And that's why they had to do that sacrifice. Now, it's hard to break that down, but you can comprehend this. Galatians 3:19, Paul said, wherefore then serves the law? It was added because of transgressions. How many understand that little thing right there? I know it's hard to, but think of what I'm saying. When he says this here about this law, talking about the Mosaic law of Mount Sinai, why was it added? It was added because of transgressions. All right, right here we have a little thing laid out here. You got from Adam to Moses, there were sins. Ever since Adam killed Cain, killed Abel, was it? Then Seth was born. From Adam to Moses, sin was increasing. How? And now remember, we fall back on again what John said sin is. Sin is the transgression of the law. Talking about God's law. Now Sinai's over here. We ain't got Sinai. But over here without Sinai, they were still sinning. They're still breaking God's law.